Hello, and welcome back to Dev Game Club, a weekly podcast in which two veteran game developers look at games from the past to discuss their relevance and impact today. I'm Brett Duville, and I'm joined, as always, by my co-host, a man who lies dreaming beneath the Red Mountain, soon to be awakened.
Oh, Tim Longo. Am I? No.
Soon you'll be awakened.
But I'm not the one.
Nerevarine.
Is that?
No.
Okay, yeah. Well,
that's what all this is about, basically. I think in the main storyline, like I'm getting some of that. I'm getting some of that. Yeah, you're starting to get some elves approaching you and saying, hey,
no,
have you heard the good word?
I haven't had that.
That still hasn't happened to you?
No, but I will explain what has happened, which is probably much more unexpected. But
yeah, we are of course talking Morrowind. I actually found my way to that yurt that you mentioned last week, which was amusing because I was oh, this is where Tim was, and they killed me.
Wait, so
I wasn't doing your quest. I was out there for something else nearby, and I was water walking back to try to get to land, because water walking is one of my spells that I get when I start the game as a battle mage. Sure. And then I guess that's maybe Alteration, which is one of my 3 magical schools. So I was water walking back to try to find my way back up at the land, and I walked up and there was a yurt. And I'm like, and I went in. Yeah, when there's two dark elves outside, and I was like, oh, I wonder if this is
I did kill them,
Tim's yurt. And I walked in and the guy freaked out and started attacking me. So I left. And then the 2 outside started attacking me, and I was really weak by then, which is going to be a sort of common refrain for me. Like, the first 2 hours today, I played all day today. This is a recording of President's Day, so my boss was kind enough to give me the day off. And so for the first 2 hours of the day, my save file was called Dare I Continue? Because I had gone all the way out to this Dwemer/Dwarven place. Remember last time I was like, is this my life now? Am I just the guy who goes to the Dwarven ruins?
Yeah.
And I had decided, I guess it is. And I made my way out, going the back way out of Saran, and I went up to there, and it was really hard getting there. And then I got there, and I went inside, and there was a quest, and I was like, oh, cool. And then I looked at my inventory, and I'm like, oh, dear. I have no healing potions. I have no magica potions, more importantly, since born under the sign of the Atronach, I do not regenerate it. And I went, oh no, I guess I should go home. And, it took me maybe 45 minutes to get out there. It took me almost an hour and a half to get back to someplace safe. I was constant. There was a point where I was resting for an hour at a time, just to get a little bit of health back, because I had no magicka. And I'm just like, and I was pushing the systems, and finding every way to scrabble. I'd rest, and then I'd go and I'd take that ring that you get at the very beginning of the game, and I'd use its 4 charges of heal, and then I'd rest, and it's 2 points apiece. It's nothing.
Oh,
you
kept the ring. You didn't get it
I still have the ring. No, I mean, at this point, I probably should, because at this point, I actually have some better healing spells, but I can't regenerate the magicka. It's the killer.
Wild. Yeah.
This whole experience was when I realized how, this is when I was like, oh, this is a preparation to go do the thing game, not a you'll find the things you need along the way game.
Yeah, that's a good point.
Right?
Yeah.
And today is when I realized that, and I've been much more careful about making sure I go to various mage guilds and fighters guilds and open the chests and get out whatever potions they've been building up, and because I don't normally need to buy a ton of extra stuff. I just need to have that, most of the time. Well, for part of quests, basically. It's I'm able to get to a certain point in a quest stage and go, okay, well, now I'm out of stuff. I got to go back. And that's the point at which I'm like, oh, well, I just spent, an hour and a half getting to this point, but now I can't get any further. So I've done a number of things where, I went out to that Dwemer location and then painstakingly made my way back. And now I'm just so burned by that experience. I'm like, well, I'm not going there for a while. I did have some luck doing some some Blade stuff and some Fighters Guild stuff that wasn't too bad, didn't involve tons of fighting. There's a lot of stuff that was just like, go to Vivek City and talk to these people, and then, you know, go to this place and, you know, buy that person a gift and they'll tell you something more about what we're spying on, et cetera, et cetera. So there's a lot of that for the Blades. For the Fighters Guild and Mage Guild quests, it's been more like, you know, go out to here. But I've had a number of quests. I went out to that place where that yurt was. There was a thing for me there for the Mages Guild, a little bit beyond it. And it was, I got all the way in, and then I just like rushed through the last 2 rooms just to see what I was up against. And I was like, oh, I can't beat this. Like, no way, you know. And I tried, like, I tried to do that just to get through to another room and like kill the main target and then maybe try to escape. No way, not happening.
What was that place called?
It's called Voss, VAS. Kill the Necromancer in Voss or something like that. I even had a partner, somebody waiting for me outside who was going to help me out. I went, and there's a point in the, I guess, main quest where, you know, the Dark Brotherhood's been after me, and I talked to somebody and they're like, well, you should go find out what's going on and why the Dark Brotherhood's after you. I'm like, yeah, I should. And so they send you this person who teleports you to Morn something, which is the Cyrodiil Palace where the Emperor is.
What?
On the other continent. Now you can't leave it, right? You're just in this like enclosed level or set of levels, but it's on another continent and you've been teleported there, and you can go into the sewers beneath that place and go to the old part of the city, and that's where the Dark Brotherhood is. So I killed a whole bunch of them, but then got to a point where it's like, and now I'm out of magic and resources, and I hired a mercenary to help me, and the guy can't path to anywhere I want him to go, so he's not even useful. I was like, oh, that'll be perfect. I'll have this guy, he'll help me out, and he just would, like, I built a set of stairs. Oh my God, you know, and there were places where it's like, oh, somehow he got here, you know, I don't know how. I just wanted them to teleport him, just like teleport him to me every 30 seconds when he's off path. Like, just put him behind me. Like, I don't have to see him. I just assume he's following me. Just cheat. Please just cheat. Yeah. Don't simulate everything. Please just cheat. Anyway, so there was just a number of quests where I took to the point where I'm like, and now I need to do the next step, and now I can't do it. I'm out of resources. You know, I can't get any help. You know, and the Dark Brotherhood are rough because they use poison, and now I've got some more spells and things. I might be better off doing these things. I might be able to like resist, you know, cast poison resistance or whatever, and then go after them, and might have a better chance at it. But boy, there were just hours of like today getting up to a certain point and going, yep, not going to be able to finish that, going back, you know, and just meanwhile just leveling like crazy. Like, I'm level 10, which is probably bad for me, but yeah, it was a whole thing.
Right. Well, at least you're
frustrating experience.
Yeah, that does sound frustrating. I mean, because it's not a hand-holding game anyway, for the most part.
No.
So no. It's like you have what you have, or you don't have what you have, you know, and
right.
I just like so I discovered accidentally early on, I literally accidentally bought some scrolls because this was like the first session, because I just didn't understand how purchasing worked or something. So I accidentally I'd clicked on them to see what they were, but that, you know, that actually tells the shopkeeper that you want to buy them. And I didn't realize that. So I bought them. I was like, oh, I'll just keep them. I don't even know what they do. Turns out they are teleport back to town scrolls.
Divine intervention.
Yeah. And so I've been using those if I get into that situation.
I only had one.
Yeah. Yeah. So I think, I mean, I don't use them very often, but I had like 3 or 5.
Oh, wow. Yeah.
So, and I had I also was unsure of whether I wanted to keep them because they were expensive back then. But anyway, so those have come in handy, but yeah, I mean, I've run into similar, I mean, yeah, the resting thing is kind of, it's not game breaking, but it's almost like you've inadvertently chosen a spec that makes the game harder on, you could see people like doing runs with this particular spec to make it harder on themselves.
I'm a battle mage born under the sign of the Atronach, so therefore I'm always mana starved or magic.
But you do more damage or something, right? Or you have more
or something, or maybe I resist magic, or I don't remember what the details are, and frankly don't care at this point. I'd much rather have the magicka. Anyway, I mean I've been getting better at managing it, and I have more restoration spells now, so I can heal myself a lot better than I could before, which is why I said I could turn in that ring at this point. Because it's like, well, at this point it's barely useful having it, but it's also like, well, I don't know if I want to make the trek down to Saidneen or whatever and turn it in.
Yeah, I mean, I also discovered this session that teleporting is actually something that you can do more. Like you can pay to teleport as well, which I didn't realize to fast travel. So I found a mage tower in one of the towns. I forget the name of it. It's the Telvanni town.
Got me there.
Tavani. Yeah, word Tel Naga. Anyway,
it's Telvanni, and all their towns are Tel something.
Okay, so Telvanni. Yeah. So, but I guess I found the name of the town. I can't remember, but it's the seat of the Telvanni
cool
faction. So anyway, the first thing that I did, because I wanted to test out, so I'm still focusing on the assassinations, the Morag Tong chain of quests, and I really haven't done anything else. I think I've done 6 or 8 more assassinations, and the first thing I did was I wanted to go back to last episode. I mentioned wanting to go and try this. I went back to Balmora to see if the Morag Tong, so I hit a bit of a wall on the assassination that I'm on right now, that I got from Vivek City, the headquarters. So I wanted to go to Balmora to see if they gave different assassination writs that were easier, that I thought maybe I had jumped ahead and skipped to Vivek too early. So thus I've hit this difficulty wall. Turns out that is not the case. Any Morag Tong quest giver will give you, and maybe this is the case for other guilds as well, I don't know, but they give me the same writs. So it's
that's not true of the Fighters Guild.
Okay. So
if I go around to different Fighters Guilds, in fact, there's a certain point at which the Balmora, I say the main one, my main one, I go to them and they say, well, we don't have anything else for you. You might try the Fighters Guilds in these places. Yeah. They're literally using that to move you around the map. Whereas you're, of course, being moved around the map by these far-flung assassinations.
Yeah, interesting.
Because you got sent all the way to the back of Beyond, that you took the boats to get to that yurt.
Yeah,
that's a long way.
Yeah, and it's also crazy to me that you found the yurt, or that there was something that, I guess it's to your point last episode, where there's sort of cross-pollinating things or something. Because I'm like, when you said you'd found the yurt and what you described, that definitely sounds like it. I thought to myself, why? How did you? It seems like it's a needle in a haystack situation, but they sent you on something in the area, I guess, that would have, it's just so weird because it feels like enormous, right? And to be able to find the same yurt.
I had gone to that town, right, that you had taken the boat to. I forget the name of it, but the town there that you went from the town to the yurt. I was in that town and I had to make my way overland to an island for even further out, which was where the necromancers were. And then coming back, I was trying to avoid problems by walking around the island to try to get back, because of course I knew there was a boat dock. I was like, I'll just walk around the island on the water.
Yeah.
I have enough magicka left, basically, to keep casting water walk so that I won't have to fight the fish. To be no enemies because I'll be on the water.
Yeah.
There's not a million cliff racers around there. There's some, but they're not constant like they are getting back from the Dwarven ruins, for example. So I'm like, okay, this will work out great. And then I walked up onto that beach and I'm like, I wonder if that's the yurt. And then, like an idiot, I went in. I was thinking I wouldn't happen because I wasn't an assassin, I was thinking, oh, this will be fine.
Yeah.
And I had not saved since I'd left the place where I had bailed on the quest, because I was like, well, I'm just trying to get back so I can go back to civilization. And so I died there, and I was like, I guess I'm doing this part again to get back to the city. I just won't go that way. Yeah. Now I know what's over there. Yeah. So I went a different way, and I got back, and it was fine, etc. But oh my goodness. Yeah. I mean, at least I have so much money. I mean, I at one point I had 12,000 gold.
Oh, geez. Wow.
Well, yeah, because I went and killed a ton of Dark Brotherhood, and it's like their chest plates are worth 1,000. I mean, you never actually get this because
nobody has the money.
Your mercantile. Well, your mercantile isn't high enough, and your personality. My personality is like a 9 because I'm an orc, barbarian. So, battle mage, but my personality is nothing. So, it's like there's just I give them something worth 1,000 according to the value, and it says I'll give you 180 for it. And I'm like, at that point, it's worthwhile bribing them with a couple hundred gold pieces so that the prices will be high. I mean, you'll make it back in like 2 objects or 1 object, even if it's those 1,000 ones. But there was a point where I'm like, well, I can't take all of this armor. What's the best bang for my buck here? To take this, like I can't bother with their helmets or their gloves or whatever, because those aren't worth enough. They're just 200 a pop because I was at weight limits, and oh my god, it was ridiculous. I'd killed so many Dark Brotherhood.
yeah I've only killed the ones that have come after me after sleeping, but it's interesting because they because one of the assassinations, the one that I had started on this session, is in that same area as that yurt, so it's like they wanted. I mean, I have to assume that it's fairly intentional, but they wanted me to get to sort of interact with the Ashlanders in that area to uncover stuff. And I don't know if it's because they're trying to dole out some of the primary quest stuff or whatever, but so anyway, the Balmora stuff did not yield new, easier quests. So I was like, okay, my next writ is this dungeon that I found that seemed too hard. So I just cheesed it like I did the others. It took me probably an hour to do this one assassination, but because he was surrounded by a bunch of other enemies that were pretty rough. And so I would just train them, kite them to the door, and, when I was low, pop out, heal up, pop back in. So I was totally cheesing it. And I did that for 5 enemies in a row, and then eventually went in and got him. But what's more important is near the part of the directions to find that dungeon, which I mentioned last episode, was to go to, you start at this camp of Dunmer Ashlanders. So it's like people who are, nomads, essentially living out. They're sort of essentially dark elven barbarians is sort of how they're described. And so I found this camp, and then you go southeast or whatever from there to find the assassination target. But what's more important is I mentioned last time, in that camp, if you talk to people, you can ask them about the dreams that you've been having, and they tell you to go to this wise woman. And long story short, throughout talking to everyone at the camp and talking to the wise woman, and there's sort of a rift in and amongst the camp. And so there's bad guys and good guys in there. And so there's something there that I might deal with eventually. They're way too hard to deal with now, but so that might yield something. But they started to sort of dole out, I guess, some of the main story stuff, I think, because they're talking about the Nerevarine, or how do you say them?
Nerevarine.
Nerevarine, yeah, and then the history of Morrowind and how the Dunmer, and then let's see, I wrote some of the notes down. Who's the name? The original Nerevarine, who, and then there's this prophet Veloth, and then the Dunmer, then their Outlanders came, and then he united the clans. It's like one of those tropes, right? And that's sort of, and everyone assumes that this person's going to come back again to reunite the clans, and it's all about Outlanders. And of course, even though I'm a dark elf, I'm still considered an outlander, so they only would tell me so much. But I did persuade them and got some of them to talk a little bit more, I think, by bribing them. But then they also reveal that part of what Nerevarine did when he united the clans was to defeat the Dwemer, which are the dwarves, right?
Yeah.
And their evil magics were destroyed. And so I was surprised by that, because I was like, I didn't realize the dwarves were evil and that they were part of sort of the problem back in the day, because I still have yet to go to a dwarven
right
tomb.
A ruin,
yeah. So they're kind of unraveling. So
I'm about to get to some of that stuff. It's amazing because my next Blades quest has to do with going to meet the Ashlanders.
Oh shoot!
So it's sending me to where you're kind of getting obliquely, right? And so like I have an explicit like go do this, and they're like, make sure you stop by Fort Moonmoth or whatever on the way, because they'll have you can get, apparently I can get potions and stuff there as well. So that's like, oh good, I could use those. Hope there's magic in there. But it's it's just wild.
And they said somebody in Moonmoth, Larius Varro, is waiting to talk to me too. So they sent me to Moonmoth.
That's because they want you to kill the Kamana Tong in Balmora, which I tried to do, and that was way too hard. I mean, there's 5 of them in one building, and attack any one of them, and all 5 of them come, and I don't know what to do about that.
Yeah. So I got to, so I did eventually get that, but it was just sort of, wasn't intending to delve into this history stuff. But it is kind of interesting and cool. I mean, there's so many proper nouns being thrown around. Nelgoth. Oh yeah. Nelgoth and Volgoth. Those are 2 different people. And then, so there's some similar names. I wonder if that must be intentional, because Nelgoth is a dude that's alive now. And then there's the prophet Veloth. Okay, no, those are not the same. Okay, so anyway, there's just so many proper nouns being thrown around, and it does feel, again, we talked about this before, but the history, though I think I'm filling in a lot of blanks myself, and there's a lot of gaps to be filled, and I'm sure it's not quite as intricate as I'm giving it credit for, but there's enough thrown out there when you talk to these people in these lines that you're kind of like putting things together in a way that makes it feel very rich, and the fact that, I mean, we're obviously playing this in a weird way because we're doing the podcast and we're comparing notes and stuff. But if I were to sort of think back to sort of the equivalent of water cooler talk when the game was out, if you and I were playing differently, we would still have the same conversations. It would be like, oh wait, you found this. And I mean, can you imagine if I had told you the yurt story, and then we come into work the next day and you're like, I found the yurt, and it's just sort of mind blowing.
I'm also on the trail of what happened to the Dwemer, right? So that's like one of the things I am investigating. That's kind of, it's actually coming at it from 2 directions right now. So I feel like there's a lot of sort of main mysteries about the game, that are the big stories about the game. And there are lots of ways into them, and you're finding a way in, I'm finding a different way in, but they're sort of like the big, I used to read a series of articles in Dragon magazine called Dungeon Craft, and it was kind of a rotating thing. There were a number of people who wrote the column, and they kind of were, somebody would do it for a couple of years and somebody else would do it. But I remember this guy, Ray Winninger, did it for a couple of years and had a really good series of columns. And he talked about how whenever you create a location, you should create a mystery. And really whenever you create anything, for your campaign, you should create a mystery about that thing, something that they're not going to find out. And then, over time, you just start to web those things together. That feels like what's going on in this game, is that there are some big stories that were, changed this place forever in some way. Right. And so it makes sense that the threads are everywhere. And it's just interesting how they present through the sort of various quest givers, more or less, right? Because it's not super quest focused game like we were talking about in pre-show. There's no XP for a quest. The reward might be, you might get some resources or something like that. You might get some money or whatever, but primarily you're doing it so you know what to do. Honestly, I mean, that's
the quests
really
are basically direction.
I don't,
right?
Like in Skyrim, I didn't need the quests, because in Fallout 3 maybe a little more so, but in Skyrim it was like, I'm just going to go find all the things on the map because that's fun, and you don't really need to follow a storyline. As I previously mentioned, I haven't finished the main quest. I finished other quests, but quest lines, but not a lot of them, honestly. I would tend to just kind of, there's so much stuff in those games. Even playing 500 hours of Skyrim, I didn't get around to finishing any major quest lines. I might have finished the Mage's Guild quest line, but it would just be fun to walk around and come across a dragon and kill the dragon and get some more dragon resources so I could do my blacksmithing and have more dragon armor, and just like yada yada yada.
Yeah.
And in this game, I feel like I need at least a little structure, because it's so deadly everywhere. I can't go anywhere without being in danger.
Yeah, I don't feel, the progression of, the difficulty ramp progression, I don't really feel like I have a handle on, right? Like there's been multiple moments when I found out that going to the other at least the Balmora, Morag Tong faction there didn't give me any new quests. Then I thought to myself, well, maybe I should just go back to the fighters, and kind of do what they had told me to do. But I'm going to try to stick to my guns, because I was able to progress past this hard one, and I've done some more since then. And now they've sent me, now the next one I have is another sort of off the beaten path, far away, kind of like you got to go to this island and do this thing and whatever. So that'll be a new location to find. But then what ended up happening most recently, in addition to the latest writs that I got, was I got to the rank of White Thrall. So obviously every rank has a different name. And so now, which is like the whole, we shouldn't talk about it too much, but like now that I'm piecing together some of the history of Morrowind, or whatever, what's the name of the Vardenfell, like Outlanders have invaded, and the clans being reunited, and thralls and slaves and like
it's rough.
It's like some white folks making a version of Africa. Like it's pretty rough. So it's like, we got to be, anyway, I had to mention a little bit because I'm in the middle of it now, and I'm playing a Dark Elf, so it's like
some of that stuff is like, no, they're allowed to have slaves because of the Alliance, and the Dunmer, I guess is the Dark Elves, had slaves before, and so part of the treaty was they got to keep them.
Yeah, but then
it's so twisted.
But then if this is analogous to Africa, then it's like, that is super messed up as well, right? And then and that's the other thing that they threw, those little tidbits they threw in there, is sort of like their opinion of the empire, right? How the Dunmer here are not obviously imperialist, right? They're they're anti-empire, and they're like, we don't really, we hate them. In fact, I think they said so. It's very, very rough. It's very like, I don't mean rough as far as quality. I just mean it's very problematic, I think, in some ways. Yeah. Let alone like some of the, they have, obviously you hear that one line where they mention slave from multiple NPCs, right? Because it's one of the random VO lines that play. It's like, where is that slave?
Oh yeah, where's that slave?
Like, you hear that all the time, and it's like, ooh.
Well, you do it. I mean, that's one I only actually hear in the Morag Tong very frequently.
Oh, I hear because I'm playing the race that I'm playing?
Because because you're
I'm
in that guild. No, you're in that guild, and you're going to that guild house all the time, and that's where that line is said.
No, I hear that line all over the place. I hear it in
Oh, really?
just
Okay.
walking down the street.
Oh, okay. I haven't heard it. I heard it for the first time today, and I was in the Morag Tong in Eldrun, I believe.
Oh, okay, yeah.
And that was the first time I had heard it, and then he said it again. And I was like, "Does Tim know about this?"
Yeah, no, no. I mean, I hear it. I heard it in Balmora. I heard it. I don't know why I'm hearing it more. Maybe I'm hearing it more because I am playing
that might be.
Dunmer, Dark Elf. I don't know. That might.
It's also. I mean, it could be purely random. You're just hearing it more.
Yeah.
So.
But it's like, anyway. So we don't have to dwell on that anymore. But
there was one that I heard that I was like, oh, that could have been the arrow to the knee. Like that could have been the one, I think, but I don't remember what it was now. So I didn't quite get it.
Yeah.
There was one that I heard that I was like, oh, that's pretty good. That's
there's a few that that could rise to that level. But anyway, what I was going to say is I got to that. So now that I'm at this level, this rank, I'm starting to now open up the NPCs in the Morag Tong headquarters, so I can barter now and get spells and train and stuff, which I couldn't do before. And I've been attacked by Dark Brotherhood while sleeping twice now, I think, both ironically in the Morag Tong headquarters is where I was sleeping. So it's like the sworn enemy of the Dark Brotherhood are coming, inside the secret base that supposedly nobody knows about. It's kind of funny, obviously, fourth wall breaking. Anyway, then the head person says, okay, I have a special assignment for you. And he has alluded to this from the beginning. And I'm like, finally, the special assignment. And he's like, you need to go find the Dark Brotherhood. And he tells him where to go. It sounds like it's actually where they told you to go, because I have to go to this person who where are they? They might be in Vivek. Yeah, they're in the Foreign Quarter.
Yeah, they're in Vivek.
Oh, okay, so it's same one. So it might be the same
one
line, and then you're sent.
Yeah, this is their way to get you to it. Yeah.
Okay. Yeah. So
don't bother hiring any mercenaries.
Yeah. Right. Well,
I spent 250 gold on that guy.
Oh wow.
And
he's useless.
And he helped me in like 2 fights, but there were things that had just regenerated from the time I'd already killed. Like there's some ghosts and stuff. He didn't really help me kill any Dark Brotherhood, and I was like, dude, this is what you're here for. Like, what?
Yeah,
I can't get you to the Dark Brotherhood. I was very frustrated.
Well, so yeah, I mean, the to the point of like, I think you put it well in that it's like, it's not. So, I mentioned that I did some YouTube watching of Elder Scrolls lore, I think in the first episode. And specifically, I wanted to obviously look up Arena and Daggerfall. So in Daggerfall, and I'm not going to go through the whole thing, of course, you can look it up yourself. But again, who's Double Negative? Double Negative's videos are probably the best ones.
Previously
just as a call out. And so when he went through Daggerfall, like the way that the quest lines all interweave and how they are sort of just connected and also disconnected, and how they influence each other is very atypical to say a Bioware structure, RPG structure, or even a JRPG structure, which is, I guess, JRPGs maybe are the most linear in a way as far as like the main storyline.
Many of them,
BioWare sort of like more of sort of flow charty, right? It's like you're taking basically paths along a flow chart, etc. But your description of it more as a web, I think, is really appropriate, because that's how Daggerfall was too. It's like it's like to get from A to B to Z. If to get from A to Z, it's not like you're going through the alphabet. It's like you can go from A to N to T to D, and it's like you're taking this web-like approach, and you eventually get to, I'll just make up something, the center where Z is, and you started with A, which is on the outside of the web. But I do feel like that's, I don't know if this is intentionally their structure, but that's what it feels like to me right now too, because as an example, when the head Morag Tong guy told me about the Dark Brotherhood, And I started asking everyone in the headquarters about the Dark Brotherhood. Now that I had that voice line or that hyperlink option, they all started giving me more information about the Dark Brotherhood, which you may already know. But one example is the Dark Brotherhood are also worshippers of Daedra. And so, and I know that Daedra is like a whole, like all of the Dagoth and the Daedra and all that sort of worshipping, I guess they're demons or something. So it's like I already knew that was sort of a key part of what's happening. There's the Red Mountain, which is where Dagoth created all the, monsters. And then there's the Ghost Gate, which is keeping them at bay. But then if the Dark Brotherhood are also worshippers essentially of these demons, then it's like, it's another, like you said, another convergence point of getting me to Red Mountain essentially.
Right.
But it's by way of Dark Brotherhood, who are our sworn enemies. So I don't know. It's very interesting, and it's just not, like I said, Fallout 3 was the last Bethesda game that I played, hundreds of hours of, and it doesn't feel like that. And I don't know if this is just an Elder Scrolls structure in general, because it sounded like Daggerfall was similar, but it's cool. I mean, it's interesting, and maybe this is the one that does it the most, and maybe, I don't know if Skyrim has sort of a web structure or not, or if it was just a bunch of separate tendrils that were not connected. But I love the fact that it does feel like, this sort of interconnectedness.
Yeah, honestly, I don't really remember, because of the way I played. I don't, and of course I was playing very specifically, to like go to places where I thought there might be performance issues, where there might, so I was kind of picking up things along the way, but also just like playing it like a lead programmer worried about how it's all going to fit in memory. Right. I mean, I always played a female Khajiit or a female Argonian, because being a female character brought in different animations, and having the tail brought in more memory needs.
Super.
So it's like I was always playing specifically like how can I make this thing run out of memory? And so I would do weird things. I mean, Fallout 3, I found a really crazy memory issue with the physics system that we didn't fix, because fixing it was just not it was a very, very specific bug. It's probably fixable, but it's like, what, let's not break anything. If somebody finds this and they crash,
Can I interrupt for a second and ask you a question related to that?
Sure.
Based on the email we got last time, can you describe what memory issues are?
Oh yeah, fair enough.
Because I mean, I don't know. Maybe that's an example of one. I'm just thinking
no. It's a good point. Actually, I think the issue was more to do with how bad performance got, but it may also have led to a memory issue. It never did crash, so kudos to some certain people whose names I won't mention, but who carried some of the memory issues on that project, on Fallout 3 in particular. Also on Skyrim. But anyway, so memory, of course, for those who've used computers, there's kind of really multiple types of memory. And the further out you get from your actual CPU, the central processing unit of the computer, the brain, the thing that does all the math, the slower that memory gets. But, on your modern PCs for a long time, there's this hard drive. It's very slow, but it's very big compared to the rest of types of memory. So in an operating system like Windows, you have what's called virtual memory, which means if you run out of what is called main memory, or RAM, random access memory, you can just take some of the stuff in RAM, put it out on the hard drive, and have that space freed up to do calculations and things like that. And then, of course, there's a closer type of memory called cache, which is very, very fast. And then even faster registers, which is what the CPU actually operates on. It's even more complicated in modern architectures, but I'm not going to go into it. Just think of it as like a series of levels where each level you go, things get 10 times slower. On a console, however, you generally can't fall back on putting things into virtual memory, which is to say on the hard drive. You actually can, as of the PS3 and the Xbox 360. In fact, some very smart engineers at Bethesda figured out how to do it before Sony had released how you're able to do it. And that's why Fallout 3 fit in memory on the PS3. So things that can cause problems with memory are large amounts of data that you need to do work on. For example, the physics system can cause lots and lots of physics primitives, which are usually spheres and cylinders and cubes and things like that that are easy to simulate the physics on, to be dragged into memory and have to be there because you have to operate on a bunch of things and see how they collide or whatever. The bug I had discovered was that there was a character in the town where the Megaton City, or just Megaton, I guess. There was a character outside of that who you could blow up Megaton, spoilers for Fallout 3, and that character would be left outside, but just his head saying, welcome to Megaton, et cetera, the things that he would say. But it was this robot, and it was just his head that was left behind. I don't know how it happened, but you could pick up that head with, not to put in your inventory, but with something we called Z keying, which, because it was a keyboard originally, you could use the Z key to point at something and physically pick it off the ground with the physics system, like you're sort of levitating it, like the gravity gun or something like that, and just walk around with it kind of hanging in the air in front of you. You could do this on the consoles with one of the sticks, you could push down on L3 or R3, which is the left stick and right stick, you could push them down. One of them would let you do this. And if you did it on the console, and particularly on the PS3 was where I was testing it, you could just carry that throughout the world. And for whatever reason, I think that thing basically was still connected back to its origin, where it was left on the ground. And it just meant bigger and bigger and bigger amounts of the world had to have its physics run. I mean, I was running at seconds per frame at a certain point because my goal was to take that head and bring it all the way to Tenpenny Tower, which is where they blew up Megaton from, and just leave it out front and have it say, welcome to Megaton to everybody who walked by, to make them feel guilty. This is how I role play. I got it all the way there. The machine was crawling, the fans were going nuts, but to the game's credit, it never crashed. And then when I dropped it and put it in a fountain out front of Tenpenny Towers, I went through a load door and came back out, and it wasn't talking anymore, and I felt very bad.
Oh, that's so funny that you had a plan for making NPCs feel guilty, and that it resulted in the bug. You know what I mean? You're like, I want to do this thing, not. I mean, I don't know if you were intentionally.
I did not know that. I was not looking for a bug. I just thought that would be funny.
Yeah.
I also didn't. There's a lot of stuff about Bethesda games that I didn't really know about, and I did not know you could do that Z key thing. And I think Guy Carver, who's the technical director, mentioned to me, "Oh yeah, you can pick things up, with the what we call the Z key, but it was one of the sticks on the consoles."
Yeah.
And you can just drag it in the world. It's like, oh, that's cool. I'll start doing that, because you could just do all kinds of, you could basically pick things up and sort of lightly throw them into the world, so you could maybe set off a trap that way, so that you don't take damage. You can throw something into a trap. And so it's just the thing I was doing. And then I turned it into role play one day, and it uncovered a strange bug. So
that's great. Role playing leading to physics bugs.
Yep.
Amazing.
Wow.
Amazing.
Yep. Anyway.
Well, thank you for that.
Yes. And of course, on a console, like I said, memory is limited, right? I mean, we talked last week about how the original Xbox was 64 meg. The original PS2 was 32 meg. The next two of those were 512 megabytes. But on the PS3, that was split, where half of that memory was available to the CPU and half of that memory was available to the GPU, the graphics processing unit. And on the Xbox, it was a unified architecture where all the memory was available to either. So you could have a game that had 500 mega textures or whatever and 12 meg of executable or something. And on the PS3, you didn't have that luxury. there were ways to move stuff back and forth between them, and I implemented some of that stuff, but now we're getting too far afield.
Well, I mean, it is a good point that's like that. I mean, I think that a lot of gamers probably generally knew the vague points that were made about PS3 and 360 as far as like, oh, the three, they're so different, and I know that you would anecdotally hear complaints about like, why is this game not on both consoles? Or I have a PS3, I want to play this game or whatever. And it's like Brett's talking about, at least in that generation, which is a lot less so since then for PS4 and Xbox One and now the new ones. I know they're much closer together as far as architecture, but
way closer than they've ever been. And the last gen, they were pretty close already. So yeah,
but yeah, they were so different, as he was just giving an example between those two. It was like, and I guess PS2 and original Xbox.
PS2 and original Xbox were also very different. Yeah.
Dreamcast, I guess, is in there sort of too. So it's like, yeah.
Dreamcast was different mostly because of its GPU, which did a very specific type of rendering called tile-based rendering. I actually think the original Xbox might have done that a bit too, but it was not. It was more hidden from you. And the Dreamcast, I think you really had to know about it. So it was, yeah, I mean, it's just this individual hardware. It's actually, I mean, I love that period of, my game development history because the hardware questions are so much more interesting. I wish I had the experience I have now to work on those machines that I was working on then, because I know a lot more, about the machines and understand a lot more about how to better use them that I've just gained from experience. I was, straight out of grad school when I first started working on the PS2, and I didn't know anything. So
trial by fire.
A lot of things we would do differently. Any one of the engineers who worked on that project, if we had to do it again. So, Anyway, stroll down memory lane.
Well, that's what we're here for. So,
it is.
One thing. I know we might want to head to email soon, but one thing you mentioned. Oh, actually, we had notes last time. I guess this was in pre-show. You didn't mention on air, but we haven't talked about sort of like crime very much yet. And I wanted to give an update on, I think I asked the question last time of like, I'm going to these taverns, often a tavern, and just like assassinating somebody, and I'm quote unquote trying to do it honorably. So I'm like not poisoning. I don't know what honorably means. They keep saying that, but I still don't know what it means. But and then I noticed for some reason on your character sheet you have like there's a wanted amount or level, and I didn't really know what the mechanics of that really were, and so I went to talk to a guard at some point because
there you go.
yeah, exactly. And because after the Dark Brotherhood had visited, they said somebody told me like you should go report to the guard that the Dark Brotherhood is attacking you. And I was like, Oh, okay, I'll go do that. But then
I met that same guy. Yeah. Mm-hmm.
Then I go talk to the guard and like, okay, listen, you're in trouble. You have to pay this amount of money. Or go to jail. You can try to bribe them, I guess. You can run, or I don't know, whatever. There's a fourth option for me though, and that is give them the writ. And so we were talking about the writs that I have in my inventory, and I'm like, what am I going to do with all these writs that I'm carrying around? And so it turns out, like, you can be like, okay, I have this writ. This is a legit assassination, dude. I'm fine. I'm good. You hand it to him. He's like, okay, yeah, I see this is official. Your papers are good. You literally
this
says,
was a clean kill.
Yeah, he literally says your papers are in order. Nothing to see here. I don't have to pay. I don't have to go to jail.
Wow.
I'm legit. So it's like
The funny thing is, I met that same guy. I was like, oh yeah, I haven't talked to a guard in a while, and I have to talk to this guard to find out about the Dark Brotherhood. He basically tells you the next step: go talk to this person who will teleport you there, I think. And he's like, oh, hold on, Padre.
Yeah.
You owe 5 gold, because I slept in somebody else's bed at some point, like, which is a no-no. Like, in later games, it'll indicate, there's a color indication, like, oh, this is not owned. You can't sleep
red,
here.
Yeah.
It's red. It's in red, and the other ones are in whatever your UI color is. But in this version, in this game, there's no indication. I mean, the game knows, but it doesn't tell you before you do it. And I know I had done that. I can't remember where. It was a place where I was thinking of joining, I think. But I hadn't actually taken the step in the dialogue tree to do it, but I thought I had. Yeah. So it was like, I don't remember which guild it was. And I went, it was like you go to the Mage Guild. In fact, it was the Mage Guild. I went to the Mage Guild. I talked to the person. I was like, "Oh, what should I do, to join here?" And they were like, "Oh, you should go do this." And then on my way down to meet that person, I was like, "Oh, I should rest." And I rested. And they were like, "Oh, that's not your bed." And I was like, "Oh, huh, weird." And then I went and did the quest, and it was like 20 hours later that you're like, "Oh, tut tut, you owe 5 gold." Yeah. So it's very, very amusing.
Well, and I found myself, even though I'm playing sort of a roguish character, because of the lack of clarity on theft, I actually find myself in this particular game not stealing stuff at all, almost. Unless I'm like in a dungeon or something, it's clear that no one's going to miss it, or I just killed the person. Because
I do the same. I don't take anybody's stuff.
Yeah, because it doesn't really seem to tell you if you've taken some, unless they attack you, somebody attacks you, but you may not know. So at the first time I talked, so the first writ I gave, I owed 80. The second one, so now every time I kill somebody, assassinate somebody, I go to a guard right away to sort of clear, to see if there's anything to clear. The second one, I owed 930 gold for whatever mayhem I got up to in this last tavern. So it's just, the reason I bring it up is obviously an update to what writs are for and sort of like the whole crime thing. But the other reason I bring it up is that they accommodated my play style, right? Like they're supposedly the Morag Tong are the good guys as far as assassins go. And I know it's stretched and there's still murder happening. But they had it coming. But anyway, the point being is like they could have just as easily like made you have to pay the money. But, the fact that I chose a certain path, they're trying to make that path, accommodate that path for me, which I do appreciate that. Even though it's super opaque, I had no idea. I just happened upon that, right?
Right. But because you intersected with this other thing, right?
Yeah,
I mean, it's kind of amazing. I have felt that way, and maybe the last point is, when I was on my second hour of trying to get back from the Dwemer location, I think I had a point where I just said to myself, the game is teaching me how I'm supposed to play it. Like, I'm realizing now that this is a preparation game and not a...
No, it's like D&D, right? To some degree.
Yeah.
It's like
gear
up.
Sometimes, I mean, yeah. Yeah, if you know what you're going after, sometimes it's, I would say some parties could stand to do more research before they go places. I'm not saying anyone in particular, but it could be, and this, it definitely points that out, right? You can talk to a bunch of people, learn as much as you can about a place, prepare for the thing you're about to do, and then go do it. And I think that's really cool.
Yeah, it's cool that it's teaching you. Yeah, I mean, and luckily I didn't get rid of the writs, right? I had them on me. Otherwise, I guess I couldn't have, handed them over. So, because I was thinking of selling them or just dumping them in a crate someplace. But
right, and then you would have been up the creek for 80 gold pieces. So
yeah.
All right, let's finally turn to some email. I think the last 2 weeks we have not had a chance to, maybe even 3. So we're going to try to do several of them. I actually have a singing review, but I'm not going to do it this week because I actually have to look up the song because I can't remember how the verses go. I remember the chorus very well. So we'll get to you. It's from Mystery Dip. We'll get to you, Mystery Dip. But why don't you go ahead and take that first email?
Okay, the one from Second Quest, right?
Correct.
Yeah, okay, so Halo leads to fish. Wait, did we? I guess I must have read this last week to myself, and I'm
probably true. Yes, we did not get
from the second quest. No, okay, this has been cut down. So apologies from Brett to you, second quest.
Yeah, I had to really cut it down for time because I think it was almost 3 times as long.
All right, so. No worries. As for Halo, it's something I very much followed the initial development of, from the original Macworld announcement to the disappointment that they were supposedly scaling back the size of multiplayer for its transition to Xbox, to the hype system launch and beyond. A couple of years later, I would end up having more touchstones with the narrative elements than the actual games, through the books to the music to the fantastic Halo 2 teaser trailer that remains a personal favorite of mine to this day. And the reason for that was simple. When I finally got a chance to sit down and properly play Halo, I broke the game. Okay. Not having an Xbox on my own at the time, I was crashing at a friend's place while on vacation one year who did happen to own one. So I booted it up and even got a short co-op session in before mainly playing the campaign solo. The recharging shield concept made for a new type of strategy, at least in my experience at the time, and the controls really managed to sell me on the dual stick approach for a console FPS. At the time, I was still struggling with the transition away from N64's C buttons. Well, that's a weird sentence to read. I was struggling with that transition away from the C buttons. Like, that's, yeah. Anyway, as the
Love those C buttons.
Yeah, well, man, I miss them. Boy, I miss them. Nope, I don't. As the right analog stick had robbed me of my easily executed GoldenEye circle strafing techniques, often rendering them into useless ankle shots in games like Agent Under Fire, I eventually adjusted, but Halo was one of the few that really clicked in that early 128-bit era. I managed to get through the library level towards the end of those first sessions, and that was definitely a moment where the game really began to fully grab me. After escaping the library, I headed into a door in a nearby mountain, which then locks behind you. Okay, fair enough. Forward we go. I continued on through the mountain complex until reaching some bridges far above a canyon. On one bridge, I finally had the opportunity to steal a Banshee, so naturally I was going to take it for a joyride. Unfortunately, I got shot down in the process and crashed into the canyon somewhere far below. Surviving, I found myself in the canyon that led me back to the library's field, but I could not go back into the mountain where I had come from because that door from earlier was still locked by the game and would not open from the outside. Uh-oh. And I had already saved after crashing, so there was no way to go back to the earlier save point. Double uh-oh. I tried exploring everywhere I could in search of an alternate route I could take back, but there was seemingly no way to progress without going through the door that would not open. I even tried going in and out of the library to see if it would reset the door trigger in some manner. And while it's certainly possible there was something I was missing, by my best efforts, it seemed like I had broken the game with no way to fix my save file, which left me with one conclusion. If I wanted to continue the game, I would have to start over. I could not finish the fight. This never gets old. I just don't know how many times I've heard that joke in my life now. It wasn't as demoralizing as finding out that I had missed my opportunity to suplex the ghost train in Final Fantasy VI, but it was pretty close. Yeah, that's ultimately I missed out on that. I didn't know about it at the time.
I know.
Ultimately, not having the time available to restart the game, I had to walk away from it. I then proceeded to convince my friend to buy this weird chores simulator that came with NES game called Animal Crossing, and we ended up trying to catch rare late night fish the rest of my stay. Well, that's a trade. That's a good trade in my book. Billy, the second quest. That's the end. So
Yep.
Yes, cut down for time. But yeah, interesting. So I feel like can't you go to the main menu and start any mission you've played again?
Yes, I believe you can.
So he maybe didn't have. He maybe wouldn't have to have played the whole thing.
Yeah,
over,
he may not have realized that either, because it's a weird structure for a game.
It is. Yeah.
It's rare for games to let you do that. I'm actually, I was telling Tim, I've been playing Dragon Quest Builders. I got back to that, and you actually can restart any of the chapters that you've done if you want. I mean, you'd be wanting to do that, I think, if you wanted to go after the trophies, because there's some do this in this amount of time, sorts of things in there that you were not going to get your first time.
But does it save the state of the world in that if you did that?
No. You would restart, but I mean, it's a PlayStation save style where it's like you're using the system menus to save games, right? So it you can save the new save games, right? But it's per chapter that they have saves. Yeah. So when you make a save, you're not saving over your chapter 2 save. You're creating a new save for chapter 3. For example, you can't save over your chapter 2 save. So you could theoretically be doing multiple chapters at once, to certain points if you wanted to, once you've unlocked them, which is a really weird structure. Yeah. So again, it's not the sort of thing you see very often, but I could see them doing it,
Well, I will second guess myself a little bit in that the original might not have allowed you to do that. It might be Master Chief Collection that has brought in more, start this level, right from the beginning and not the whole thing. But I mean, to his point, and despite scouring, I'd be surprised if there wasn't a way out of the situation. However, one thing that comes with these sort of sandbox games, as we talked about with the Halo series, is there's a lot of insanity that can happen. There's a lot of physics craziness. Like you've seen people launching warthogs into the hemisphere, and so it's like, so it's, there's not the hemisphere, but launching them into the atmosphere, the stratosphere. Yeah. I knew that was the wrong word. So I mean, I can also see a world where order of operations, banshees are involved, you're flying, you fall below some trigger volume, and then things don't kind of reset. They expected you to die at one point and you didn't die,
Right. Right.
So yeah, I mean, it's definitely plausible in a game like that, because it's just, when, like we talked about with the Bethesda games, it's like with such great openness to player agency comes stuff like bugs like this.
Yeah, for sure. And of course, appropriate that he was referencing some 007 games in there, because of course they expect you to die, Mr. Bond. Let me take another one here. This is subject Morrowind and Overwhelming Freedom. It's from Ashton Herrmann. Hello again, Ashton. He says, hi again. Still can't believe you went from covering Halo to Morrowind back to back, since these games are veritable cornerstones for me. Listening to the first episode about the game, you both have already touched on so many of the reactions I had when I first played Morrowind. Most notably for me was the sense of being overwhelmed by the game. You used words like quote-unquote daunting, for example. I can remember booting up the game for the first time, creating a character, feeling completely lost as I stepped out of the census office and onto the streets of Saint Denis, and then shutting the game off because it was all too much. Eventually, though, I pushed through my discomfort and ended up falling head over heels in love with Morrowind. There's an opacity to Morrowind that lends itself to the sense of exploration and discovery. I love Oblivion and Skyrim too, but even those games don't quite capture the magic for me quite as well as Morrowind does, and I believe it's because they're intentionally more inviting and welcoming to players than their older siblings. I think Morrowind represents an interesting intersection for the series in this regard by being more streamlined than its predecessors, but still significantly less so than its successors. As developers, how do you both think about that line between accessibility, and I don't mean in terms of controls or difficulty, and discovery? I know this is a topic you've touched on in the past, but I think it would be interesting to hear your thoughts within this specific context. Thanks as always, Ashton Herrmann. So yeah, there's a lot of friction in this game, right? And which is a term we've used before, that sometimes there's interesting friction, and I think a lot of what we talked about today, has even kind of touched on how that friction is useful, because if we were not playing this together, you'd be having your own weird experience that finds its way to tie back into things. And it's only because you're water coolering it with me that I'm saying, yeah, but I got that too, but I got it this other way.
Yeah.
And that would be very opaque to us. Like that the structure is there, right? It would be hidden from us that was happening, you know?
It's an interesting game to talk about from emails with listeners, because I think my first question would be like, did they have anybody that they were talking to at the time who was also playing the game? You know, like even if we weren't doing the podcast, you know, we would have been working at the same company, right? So we would have had some amount of people, probably. We have the luxury of some amount of people probably to talk to about the game. And that's been, for my modern gaming career as a player, that's been the case, right? For 26 years or whatever, right? It's like, there's always been somebody to talk to probably about a game. And I often wonder with games like this, you know, how, you know, obviously with the internet now, there's a lot more communities which have popped up that people can talk to. But back then it's like, do you feel like this is just how it's supposed to go, all the friction you're talking about? Or do you have common experiences with other people? You know, it's just interesting to hear what people's water cooler talks were like, because those, I think when you think your playthrough is the only kind of playthrough, or it's the only one you know about, like, I think it does change the gravity of what the game really has to offer. To his, unless you play a second character and start over, right? Then you'd see. I wonder what, you know, you probably, as you're playing, you're wondering what would happen if you did this instead or that instead. To his question about, like, for myself thinking about this problem, I think the game that came to mind immediately for the topic of sort of like that how much friction do you put in? I'm summarizing this question, but how much friction do you put into a discovery-based game, or with any discovery-based elements to a game? I would call on on Breath of the Wild for a recent example for myself, and the reason I bring them up is I think they did probably the best for me as a player on this recently, and it is the way that I think it should be thought about. Whether I've thought about it this way in a good way myself, I think definitely remains to be seen, but it's sort of the onion layer metaphor for me, in that there should be an aspect of the game that is fairly frictionless for players to sink their teeth into and feel like they have some amount of direction. But if you have layers upon layers outside of that have more friction, I feel like that's the balance for me as a player, and maybe even as a developer, that you should try to find. So you kind of get both. You have like, okay, I always have something I know that I should be doing, but if I just go step a little bit to the left or the right, or I kind of go off the beaten path, I start finding these things that are very opaque and very like, what is this? You know, like, is this something? And then if you dig into it more deeply and more deeply and more deeply, you find like all these sort of subthreads. Versus, say, the Ubisoft model, which is sort of like, no, everything's out there. You can find it. There's a list. We talked about this before. Like, it's there. You just got to go do it. But I think that Breath of the Wild, you know, I guess Witcher actually was much more the Ubisoft model, but Breath of the Wild had a lot. There were definitely more opaque elements that you're like, this is something. Oh, here's a puzzle. Here's a something. And so I think
that dates back to its history. Ocarina is that way very much.
Yeah,
so, right?
Totally.
I mean, even bleeding more into the critical path, I think, than we would probably do today. But you can see those elements there with a lot of the weird side content. I mean, you remember I was doing.
Yeah,
there was some whole side quest I was doing where you were like, "What? you did what now?"
Yeah,
you know, and it was all
right?
that's
where it's like,
yeah, exactly, yeah, and I mean a number of things. There were several things like that, but definitely there were whole side quests lines that even knowing they were there was opaque.
Was hard, yeah.
Yeah.
But yet in Ocarina, you never felt like you didn't know what you should do, right? You always had a thing you needed to do.
Yeah.
But there's just these other layers where you're like, what the heck?
And, what is this? Right, yeah. And that's true of other later Zelda games as well, I believe. I mean, I haven't played all of them, but I've played an awful lot of them. Gosh, maybe I have played all of them to some degree since Ocarina. That might be true. I'd have to go look at a list.
I haven't played Skyward Sword. Yeah.
Oh, that's one I haven't. I have it, but I haven't played it. In fact, I was gonna play it last year when I was streaming, and then I started a job for this cruel taskmaster. So I didn't get around to it. Yeah, I mean, I would tend to agree. I think it's good to have things out there that are kind of weird and off the beaten path. I love when you feel an individual developer's passion come through and how they're kind of pushing the tools to do something they weren't really meant to do, to get some weird experience out of a game. And but on the other hand, I'm playing. I told Tim I'm playing Psychonauts 2, and there's nothing in that game that is opaque in this way, and the way they get the weirdness is just by how strange everything in the game is. Like they just choose a totally different model, which is like, no, there's nothing about the gameplay that is different or strange in that way. There might be some places where things are harder to do, like that there's more, like if you're going to 100% the game, there's a lot of sort of really paying attention to the environment and all the things that you can do, and like really reading what different elements are. But that's really more just a practice thing. I mean, it's sort of an action platformer. So, but there's a section where you're in somebody's brain and there's a game show, and it's very, very, very out there. There's a section where you're getting a band back together from like maybe 70s psychedelic kind of time as far as bands went. It's just everything about the content is strange, and that's a totally different model, which I also love. Yeah. There's nothing about the play that's got a lot of friction in it, but at every turn I'm like, oh my God, I can't believe they're doing this. Like, this is so artful and strange and like nothing else in video games, and I'm just loving it to death. So anyway, that's another thing I think about, is like, why not make it all accessible, but really push the boundaries on what the content could be, I guess, is another way I think about it. So,
yeah.
Because that would be the criticism I would have of the Ubisoft games, much as I love them, is that they're all the same. Like they're very, very samey. And that's why I only play like one of them. Like I don't play Watch Dogs and Far Cry. I played Far Cry 2 and Far Cry 4, but I don't like those come out and I'm like, I can't wait to play the new Far Cry. I was like, no, Assassin's Creed's got me covered. Like I don't need two other series of that,
formula.
Yeah, I mean, it's just, and it's like, which flavor of this do you like the most? And I like the historical with weird sci-fi thing. That's okay. That's fine for me. But I would have a hard time playing a bunch of them because it would just, because they don't push the content aspect enough for me. So I've picked the one that's weirdest enough for me to want to play it. Anyway. Yep. Let's try to hit one more. I know you're going to stream tonight, so let's just hit the one more email that you've got just to get some of them through the pipeline.
Yeah. Okay. Halo thoughts from an Xbox newbie from Shu. Hey fellas, your recent series on Halo Combat Evolved remind me of a time spent nearly 20 years ago playing the first couple of hours of my brother's first couple Halos on my brother's original Xbox. It first led me to dig the old console out of storage and try to power it on, but sadly it had kicked the bucket. I've been a PlayStation gamer with a splash of Nintendo here and there over the years, but I've never owned an Xbox. As your discourse moved to Halo Infinite, however, I took the plunge and picked up the Series S console and have been plowing my way through the Master Chief Collection and beyond. Playing these games, some for the first time in 2022, was a unique experience, and I wanted to share some thoughts with you. Firstly, I had never known the story about Halo CE being developed originally as an RTS, but playing with that in mind, it was clear to see the latter levels, largely spent working through monotonous hallways, must have really been tacked on late in development to pad out the game. Halo 2, however, felt heavily inspired by immersive shooters like Half-Life almost immediately. Halo 3, oddly, felt like a step backwards in many regards, but I think perhaps the devs struggled with ambition and a new console's capabilities. The less linear level design, combined with an absence of effective waypoints, made this game frustrating at times. Halo ODST was my favorite of the Bungie titles by a wide margin. Such fantastic storytelling and a novel design structure. It's no surprise this game is something of a cult classic. Moving on to 343 games, Halo 4 absolutely shocked me from a graphical and cinematic perspective. I couldn't believe it was a 360 title originally. It looks and plays like many shooters from the Xbox One PS4 era, and I saw immediately how many games from this era were influenced by it. Doom 2016 in particular seems like a spiritual successor. I've just started Halo 5, thanks Game Pass, and I have to say, Tim, this one rules. The modernized controls, extremely well-tuned gunplay, the vastly improved mobility are immediately noticeable. While it was innovative for its time, Bungie's in-game dialogue storytelling approach often led to confusion where crucial story developments could be lost over the hail of gunfire, enemy barks, and other myriad distractions. Halo 5, however, nails it. The fireteam chatter is superb, and I'm following all the beats perfectly. I can't wait to play more and dig into Infinite next. Excited to see Morrowind is next up in the queue. Thanks again for all the great pods. Hope you both have a lovely new year. Cheers, Shu. Wow. Thank you for that.
There's a proof positive of the fact that we're way behind on email, which is why I tried to get a few more in this week, despite we're pushing perilously close. I mean, it's funny because I continued to play. I played all of Halo 2. I would actually, I'm pretty sure I've played Halo 3 in the past, so I probably won't revisit that one. But ODST is one of those ones where I'm like, man, I should really check that out.
It is a cult hit.
Yeah, I had heard that at the time, and in fact, I think I even had a free copy from Bethesda, but I gave it away to a teen of my acquaintance at the time, who I thought would probably snap it right up and play through it, and I knew it would be years for me because of how my life works. So I never did get back to it. But yeah, I really enjoyed them, and Infinite, I really delivered. I mean, I played an awful lot of Infinite. I got basically all the missions. I think I had one thing that I didn't see on the map until after I'd finished. I was like, well, I'm not going back for that one thing now. But I did really enjoy it, and I played it through to the end. So
yeah, it'd be interesting, Shu, if you're up for riding back in once you start playing Infinite. It'd be interesting to hear your thoughts, because it definitely, Infinite's meant to be, no pun intended, sort of a full circle kind of approach to the franchise.
Oh boy!
So wasn't intended. It wasn't intended. I said it was not intended. Mm-hmm. So yeah, I mean, just especially because you're a new Xbox noob, as you said, and you're playing through Master Chief Collection all relatively close together. You're able to see sort of the progression, and so I'm always interested to hear from that. And thanks for the kind words on 5. I'm definitely proud of a lot of aspects of that game.
For sure. Well, thank you to those folks to sending mail to devgameclub@gmail.com. We do actually have a pending singing review. We will get to it soon. Actually, my voice is a little raw tonight, so I'm glad we didn't do it now. But we will soon. It's coming. So that's your cue to make sure you listen through to the reviews and stuff here at the end of the episodes. You can find us on the web at devgameclub.com or at Twitter at devgameclub. We can also find my co-host at
Tim Longo Jr. with a JR at the end.
And he's also streaming on Twitch at twitch.tv/Tim Longo Jr. with a JR at the end, where you are going to continue probing deeper into the village tonight, I understand.
Yes. I am doing that. Yep.
So where had you left off?
I'm having a vague memory of that fact.
There was the fly lady.
Oh,
right?
you know what? No, I fought the main lady.
Lady Dimitrescu?
Dimitrescu? Is that how you say her name? Dimitrescu?
I believe so.
Dimitrescu. Yeah. Dimitrescu. Okay. Yes, I basically encountered her, quote unquote, like in the, not the sewer, the dungeon, and she sort of chased. Actually,
Oh, and she cut off your hand.
I got my hand cut off. Yep, cut off. Yep.
And then you poured like that goo on it, and your hand came back.
Came back. Yeah. And as it was happening, I'm like, no, he's not gonna. He's not gonna do this. Oh, yep, he did it. Oh, yeah, this is Resident Evil. It worked. It works, everybody. And then I ran away. So I just, I think after that you kind of like maybe leave. In a courtyard anyway, so I think I ended at the merchant guy. So after that whole sequence, okay. I escaped essentially right from that encounter, and she's laughing.
Oh, there's more to come. I'll be joining in because I might throw on Morrowind and like stream you at the same time. Good times. Our intro and outro music was written and performed by Kirk Hamilton, commissioned by friend of the cast Aaron Evers, and our logo is of course by Mark Garcia. Have fun wandering about aimlessly in the wastes this week, and good night.
Good night.